So tonight we have speaker Reverend Diane Stark. She's going to be talking on a few how-tos, some practical thoughts on self-mastery, how to be spirit-led, how to stop thinking so much, and how to live without aging, and how to travel the ethers, and apparently how to do your talk without notes. Anyway,
No, no, I got them now.
okay, good, great.
So, yeah, so you've covered the summary of the four how-tos I'm going to do, and they're kind of a little bit weird how-tos. They're not the kind of how-tos you usually come across for a bag of tools. But what I'm getting at here is um, what Steve's talking about, self-awareness. So, let me get this here. So here we go. We have reminders all around us of how to be spirit-led, cues that signal us to tune in. Remember, tune in, turn on, drop out. All that hippie stuff was no news to me. I already heard all that transcendent stuff growing up in the metaphysical community. Love-ins, hootenannies, meditation, reincarnation, dimensions of dimensions. And there's a brand of dog food called Pure Being. That's how Charles Fillmore uh, began his great invocation. It says, "We are now in the presence of pure being." Ha! They got a lot of nerve naming a dog food after something so spiritual. But then we can expect to find reminders of the presence everywhere. In order to hear the calling of higher vibrational energies, many people use dowsing, pendulums, divining techniques like the I Ching, the tarot, the tea leaves, psychic channeling, even the Ouija board. People use in an attempt to gain information about their lives, their future, and their choices. And, you know, spirit leads us to those sources sometimes. It is a constantly unfolding process to sensitize yourself to the guidance of spirit. Divine mind influencing you to your highest good. And I love that terminology. It's so inclusive. Uh, when we say divine mind, it includes angels, spirit guides, esoteric dimensions of consciousness. All the various modes of transcendent experience are available in the term divine mind. So now, being in search of how to be spirit led, we first need to identify what are the influences that blind us to this leading? What are the illusions that deceive us from following this lead? Well, emotions, ego, negativity, just buying the propaganda that's all around us. Now, what Steve was talking about today, the senses, believing in the senses, the consciousness of sense, or personal context, consciousness, or self-centeredness, and all these limited mortal states of consciousness, they really mix and match and swirl together. But we can rebel, refuse to accept the lesser energy states. It's not just about developing the skill and sensitivity to avoid and diffuse negative energy and illusions of sense consciousness. We have to recognize the signals, the language of spirit itself. Dreams, coincidences, revelations within, quiet nudgings. There's a book called Divine Nudges. But in fact, everything we are, how we show up, our tastes in clothes, furnishings, our handwriting, these are all coded messages of our soul's path and the direction that we're offered, if we but know how to read these signs. And we do know. That is the key to being spirit-led, to realize that through the identity of the Christ that we truly are, we have all that we need to recognize our spiritual calling. It's already there. We need do nothing more but listen. And when there is nothing that you love, nothing that you want more than the absolute goodness of spirit to outpour itself in your life, this is when you will be able to be truly led by spirit. So now moving on to how to stop thinking so much. Why would you want to? Well, that's what I'm going to tell you. So, have you ever looked back on some experience that you had and perceived how your uninterrupted processing of the experience, your constant inner chatter, obscured the opportunity for you to grow in the experience? If you can say yes, then you can comprehend why it is something to achieve to stop thinking so much. Actually, being spiritually quickened, living in an illumined state of consciousness makes you a little bit dumb, a little bit stupid. Every now and then I come across some person teaching esoteric information who will allude to this, how it goes when we are really seriously devoted to living in tune with the infinite. And that's a phrase by Ralph Waldo Trine. He wrote a book called In Tune with the Infinite, and I looked that up and found out that Ralph Waldo Trine was an influence on Henry Ford. But we don't spend energy talking to defend ourselves. We don't spend energy to justify ourselves, to influence others, to have the last word, and to unhook ourselves from these pointless efforts is one way to stop thinking so much. The Course in Miracles emphasizes that. It emphasizes that we are innocent and need not be defensive, need not protect that which is already omnipotent. But what about the wisdom of recognizing the limitations of intellect? The shaman archetype, the shaman role in a tribal grouping of humanity. One of the functions of the shaman is to read the hearts of all of the group and heal any place where there is a breakdown, because that threatens the security of the whole community. And they know this. And so they go and restore the wholeness of any woundedness of any member of the society. So this is not an intellectual process. This is a process that is beyond the wisdom of intellectuality. Hans Christian Andersen was a storyteller who really brought this out. All of his stories are about how foolhardy is the intellect. I mean, The Emperor's New Clothes is a perfect example of that. And there's another writer for children's literature that tells, I don't know if you've read A Wrinkle in Time. It was made into a movie, but the movie didn't really carry the true essence of the novel, which got a Caldecott Medal Award, I think, for children's literature. But it tells the story of it's a science fiction story for kids, but it tells the story of a young girl who knows that her brother has been captured by his fascination with a huge mass of energy that is pure intellectuality without any heart. The symbolism of kings are of the intellect in the Bible. The conversion of Jacob, who represents intellect, to Israel, who represents spiritual awakening. John the Baptist is the forerunner, represents the intellect that is the forerunner to the awakening of the Christ. So if we can see that we don't need all that intellectualizing, we don't need all that verbosity to experience divine consciousness, then we can transcend it. We need to tune into the vibrational energy that is beyond words. Joel Goldsmith wrote a book called Beyond Words and Thoughts, From the Metaphysical Consciousness to the Mystical. And I think that really points us in the direction that I'm trying to indicate here. Now, we may think that we find a contradiction in our metaphysics here, in that, thought itself is quite sacred. We say that God is mind. However, we have to come to an appreciation of how sacred is a thought and how transcendent it is to say, God is mind. But then isn't that intellect? No, it is not. Intellect, that is interference to our exposure to spirit, is not the same phenomenon as mind itself. But when you let your thoughts be the receptacle of the rain of divine energy, then simplicity, peace, and order become firmly established in your consciousness, and you stop thinking so much. So now moving on to how to live without aging. So there's two levels here. One is the physical level, and one is the level of the unseen realm. So how many here think that I'm going to talk about the physical? I am going to talk about that first. So our bodies are the temples of the living God. Our bodies are self-healing and self-cleansing. Our bodies express the psychic and psychological qualities of our soul. Our bodies are the chariot with which we travel through life. So how can we help our bodies to do their job, which is helping us to do our job? Well, keeping them from going toxic. Water, sunlight, rest, consumption of clean consumables, like not smoke, not solvents, natural foods that are from agricultural sources. Assist your body in releasing cell wastes and don't block the skin from perspiring and being watered. Don't traumatize your body with excess strain or fatigue. This all sounds so good, but how many of us can reach the age of, say, 60 and claim that we've done all these things and therefore should stay young? Yeah, too late. But wait, we say that old age has no power over us. We're saying that it only has the power that we give it. The cells will lose their elasticity and their moistness in an aging process that appears sometime after, say, 50. But the thing is, you can project such joy and beauty that is unnoticed. So that's one thing. Even though your physical appearance shows effects of time, your affect, your personality can obscure it. But what I really want to show you is how to live without accumulating the mental and emotional habits that cause aging. I know I have read in the writings of Charles Fillmore that every negative thought that we experience has a traumatizing effect on the cells of our body. So how do we succumb to negative thoughts? It's implied so subtly in the atmosphere we live in, the atmosphere of influences that are motivated by profit, by power, by greed, greed for money. In a sense, money equals aging. If we could unhook ourselves from believing that money has power over us, we would increase our well-being, our capacity to remain young, so much. The other main aging agent in our existential soup is resistance. We resist so much the weather, the news, the prices, the symptoms of our health, the requests of our neighbors, the phone ringing, the traffic lights. Shall I go on? But how to let all that go? Well, remember seeing the good. God is absolute good. God is all there is, and our perceptions determine our experience. Talking about being self-aware, this is the key. There's so many ways to wrap this one principle up, but becoming more self-aware puts you in a place to avoid judging and stop resisting. So that is what we do in spiritual living, become more self-aware, take responsibility for the dynamics of our own consciousness, and attune to the consciousness that Jesus taught when he spoke of the kingdom of heaven. That is how you will live without aging. So now we have left how to travel the ethers. And let's say that ethers is a designation for the substance of mind itself. And mind can mean the unified field of consciousness. So traveling the ethers can mean then experiencing consciousness states that are paranormal, that are divergent from the mode of consciousness we consider normal. Is this really possible? Why would we want to do it? Why would you want to do it? Maybe you don't. But we metaphysical types, we are endlessly curious about this woo-woo stuff. And the bottom line is, what Shakespeare said in his play Hamlet, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Yeah, it's just no one knows the limits of what is possible in the inner realms, the inner planes. When Jesus said, "In my Father's house are many rooms or many mansions," I think he was alluding to that. Now, if you remember James Redfield in his book After the Celestine Prophecy called The 10th Insight, he portends that it's possible to have the same perspective on our lives from this side of the veil as we have in the afterlife. And that's just one possibility. So I guess I'm just trying to give us a glimpse of the vastness of the unseen, the inner realm, the dimensions of consciousness that are just now beginning to become revealed in the minds of humans. But why? So what? Well, it's because it's humbling. It is settling. It is somehow quieting. Just the same as when we peer out into the cosmos and see a physical reality that is virtually unfathomable. So we can look within and come to a realization of the infinitude of consciousness. It stops one from thinking we can slice and dice metaphysics. It frees one to surrender to the allness we ascribe to God, to the divine. So, how to travel the ethers? Watch and wait. Be alert. Be open. Have the cameras running so that you will remember what you discover. In his landmark book, Cosmic Consciousness by William Morris Buck, he describes what he was able to gather information on of those individuals who actually experienced this breakthrough. And if I remember correctly, he says that among all of the individuals he identified who he suspects, his premise was that humanity was evolving to a new state of consciousness, which he described as cosmic consciousness, and certain individuals are forerunners, have the experience ahead of the rest of the mainstream of people. And he said that the evidence of having had this experience was that their countenance was brighter, that they no longer feared death, and that they had a higher moral sense of elevation. Now, when you pierce the veil of normal awareness, it changes you. It clarifies you. It does not mess you up. It simplifies you. It doesn't make you more complicated. It heals you. It doesn't make you more vulnerable. It fulfills your emotions. It doesn't isolate you. So this is why it is worth talking about. This is why traveling the ethers is a metaphor for discovering the powerful force of good that God is. And this is how traveling the ethers, that is, going beyond the limitations of human consciousness, is going to make a difference in your life. Know this and be blessed by it. Amen. Thank
Hey,
you.
Diane, it looks like we lost Steve as far as
Oh dear.
transitioning between your presentation and the discussion of the group. But um, it your presentation gave me a whole lot to think about, and there's so much that resonates with what you said. Yeah, there's a whole lot that I could bring in, but the only thing that really comes to mind right now, where you started as far as a dog food called Beyond Being.
Oh, it called pure being. Yeah.
Pure Being. That was it.
Yeah.
It reminded me of a joke about. Did you hear about the dyslexic atheist? He didn't believe in dog. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's so much. I think the other major thing that you talked about that really resonates with something that I learned a long time ago, and that is resistance causes pain. And if we can live life without resisting it, it makes things so much easier.
And we don't even realize that we're resisting things so often, we resist the weather, like, oh no, it's gonna, is it, or what we hear on the news. Why do we have to have this? It's very subtle.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. So I would go ahead and call for questions or comments from everyone. If you don't already know how, you can switch the screen from speaker view to gallery view in the top right corner, and let's just have a discussion because there's so many wonderful ideas here. We can just kind of take this along and see where we go.
Yeah, I would say that resisting is doing that reliving of the past. When we resist, we're just thinking, oh, well, this is the way it always has been. This is the way it's always going to be. And we're going back and we're not letting ourselves see anything new or creative or not letting God lead us. We're just taking, this is the way it always was. It always will be, and it ever will be, No,
I think you're talking about a basic resistance to change. Are you, Barbara?
Yes, it's always been this way, and so this is the way it'll always be. This is what I always have seen. This is what I've always known. How can it be any different? And that's not allowing that there is a God that can make it different if we let it happen.
And another form of resistance could be just strong opinions, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't like that, or I
Yeah.
don't like this, or I don't like that, or too cold, or
Yeah,
yeah.
the way things should be.
Barbara, are you talking about changing your identity? Like, being willing to examine your beliefs and go, hey, this isn't working for me.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
When something happens and you say, oh, this is terrible, this happened. Well, there's that parable kind of thing about the man who had a son who was to be called up for war or something, and somebody said, oh, that's terrible, your son's being called up for war.
Yeah.
I forget how it went, but he broke his leg and so he couldn't go, and oh, isn't that terrible, he broke his leg, and then one thing after another, each thing, something changed.
It's either
And so,
wonderful or terrible, and it goes back and forth, back and forth.
yes,
One
and
thing
it
leads
isn't
to
either
the next.
right. It isn't either one wonderful or terrible. But if we allow ourselves to say, oh, this may look bad, but there's something really good that's going to come out of it, and look for that good, because God is in everything. God is good, and God has a good idea for us if we'll let God do what God wants.
Yeah.
instead of thinking we know better. Yeah, instead of resisting. I know I'm guilty of this. I can, but in a lot of ways, but as I've gotten older, one of the things I heard on the news today is that as people age, there's so many things that we hear that are bad about aging. But one of the things they said that is good as you age, people learn how to work with one another better, how to cooperate better, how to work out problems better. And it's only by aging that we do this. And I thought, wow, maybe that's why I'm listening to these things now. I'm actually believing that things can get better. But I had to age before I could actually accept that idea.
I I kind of had a chuckle about the aging part too, because I'm always being told, like on the phone, and I say something like, "Well, I'm 82," and they're going, "No, you can't be 82. You don't sound like you're in your 60s, Or if you're out and about and you're like, "Woohoo! All right, let's go."
Yeah.
It's fun, yeah, and yeah, and a lot of it has to do with, well, all of it has to do with your mind concept of that whole idea of aging. Every year I get younger. How's that?
How old
Exactly.
do you feel in your mind, Lori?
Same as I always have. No different.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in my 30s or something. It's just crazy. It's just like that. My mindset is just there, and that hasn't really moved.
Right.
And yeah, it's interesting. The body got older.
Hey, Diane, this is Pete talking. I really enjoyed your talk tonight. Also, Charles Fillmore talked about the big things, having enthusiasm. Basically, same thing. Whatever you do, be enthusiastic about it. Have excitement about it. And
The
so,
zeal.
zeal.
Yes.
That's
What
it.
was
Zeal. That's
he
the
had?
word.
What was that affirmation he had?
Yes.
He said, "I am." Oh, Charles, what is it?
Zeal is the word. He used the
Yeah, I
word.
remember
he
what
has the-
I know what you're talking about, because I remember someone quoting it many years ago, but I don't remember the details.
I actually had them print up a whole bunch of cards with that on it, and I should remember it. My mother had a lot of cards with that affirmation on it, and it was sitting right next to her chair when she passed away. And
Okay,
that's why I went ahead and printed up extra copies. Zeal was
There it is.
I fairly sizzle with zeal.
Yeah.
zeal and enthusiasm
Yeah,
and spring forth with a mighty faith
Yes.
for all the
To
things
do the things that ought to be done by me.
correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the things I've always loved about Charles Fillmore is the fact that it's openly stated that he was not of the mind that he had accomplished it all, that he was open and receptive to new ways of thinking and perceiving what was going on. And that happens to us oftentimes in just meetings like this, where we get exposed to ideas that we might not have otherwise considered because of somebody else has shared something experientially that doesn't fit right in immediately to our own experience. Enjoyed the talk.
Thanks.
Yes.
I'm thinking about that first one, how to be spirit led, and it really touches my heart to say it when there's nothing that you love more, nothing that you want more than the goodness of God to pour forth in you in your life, then you will be spirit led. And I think that the story of Isaac is trying to show that in a way Isaac had to come to a real brush with, what did he love his own son more than God? And that had to be flushed out. And I find that, that there's some echo about that. I don't think the story exactly is told the way it's meant to be understood. that that we have to come to sometimes a test of ourselves of whether we are we becoming attached to something of a lower vibration, something that's limited, rather than we are wanting fully to be immersed in spiritual energy for our lives. And that's always kind of the path. That's how to be spirit led, is to remain connected and prioritized. And it's the same way in the parable of the pearl of great price, that a man, went and found a pearl of great value and sold all he had to have it. And I can remember saying to someone who asked me one time, "So Diane, what are your metaphysical principles?" And I said, I've studied a lot of different teachings and a lot of different practices, but right now it's just anything that comes between me and my peace has to go.
Great. Melvin, did you want to say something?
Oh yes. So first and foremost, peace, love, and light to everyone. And I'm glad to be here, and especially amongst so much wisdom. And I came in a little late, but I came in, I think, just in time, because one of the sayings that, or what you said, Diane, in reference to traveling the ethers, is a metaphor, and I didn't get the end part. And I would like for you, if you could, repeat it, because in a lot of literature that I read, so many people try to make the word ether or ethers like they try to make it so like unreachable. And when you said that, I was like, oh, I came in on time, even though I was, I had some errands to run, and that was some light for myself, that I can carry throughout, my day and my life. And if you could repeat that, I would greatly appreciate it.
Oh, okay, great. I'd like to start with how when you pierce the veil of normal awareness, that's traveling the ethers. When you pierce the veil of normal awareness, it changes you. It clarifies you. It doesn't mess you up. It simplifies you. It doesn't make you more complicated. It heals you. It doesn't make you more vulnerable. It fulfills your emotions. It doesn't isolate you. This is why it's worth talking about. This is why traveling the ethers is a metaphor for discovering the powerful force of good that God is. This is how traveling the ethers, that is, going beyond the limitations of human consciousness, is going to make a difference in your life. Is that it?
Yes,
Does that do it?
Oh, you're you were muted.
Me?
No.
Melvin, you're
Melvin.
muted again right now.
Okay.
Unmute.
Oh, you're
I apologize. It said, okay.
okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was it. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah.
And just for reference, the video from this presentation will be on YouTube tomorrow.
All right.
And if you don't find it on YouTube, you could go to the copticcenter.org, and there's a link to the YouTube channel where all of the talks are there. So for those.
Well, I gave this as a series in the beginning of the year at my own church Unity, and it was the 4 Sundays of January, how to each different Sunday, but we were closed that really snowy Sunday. Do you remember that? And I didn't get to do how to stop thinking so much. So it
So
was
we
good.
got to pick it up here.
Yeah, I got a chance to pick it up here. Yeah. I think it's really, it's a real important distinction to make between intellectuality and spirituality. A lot of times we worship the intellect and miss the spiritual awakening that intellect is the avenue to, it's the pathway to. And there's a lot of that symbology in the Bible, but Yeah, and did you recognize how in the stories of Hans Christian Andersen, the children's tales, he's always making the point that the brain, the mental, like the story of the Snow Queen is a very long parable about how intellect, which is represented by iciness and coldness, uh, is a limited mode of existence, and the girl Herda who tracks Kai down and finds him and is able to free him by the power of her devotion and love, um, is a wonderful metaphor for what I'm trying to talk about.
Thank you, Diane, for speaking tonight. It was
Thank you for having me. It's totally my pleasure.
all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.